Hello, everyone. And so we are back once again with another Ruminations, returning back to Rumi after a nice break last week with the Bhagavad Gita reading and reflection. Today, I have a poem queued up and ready to go. I wanted to jump in and do this video this morning because I've been reading this series of Rumi's poems all centered around themes of spring, which is very fitting here. I know it's getting to be late May, but in this part of the country, that means that it's still very much springtime. And so, in reading these series of poems, I've arrived at perhaps one of my very favorite of all Rumi poems. I know I say that about every other time, but this time I really mean it. And this one is called The Grasses. So, without further ado, The Grasses. The same wind that uproots trees makes the grasses shine. The lordly wind loves the weakness and the lowness of grasses. Never brag of being strong. The axe doesn't worry how thick the branches are. It cuts them to pieces. But not the leaves. It leaves the leaves alone. A flame doesn't consider the size of the woodpile. A butcher doesn't run from a flock of sheep. What is form in the presence of reality? Very feeble. Reality keeps the sky turned over like a cup above us revolving. Who turns the sky wheel? The universal intelligence. And the motion of the body comes from the spirit like a water wheel that's held in a stream. And the motion of the body comes from the spirit like a water wheel that's held in a stream. The inhaling, exhaling is from spirit, now angry, now peaceful. Wind destroys and wind protects. There is no reality but God, says the completely surrendered sheik, who is an ocean for all beings. The levels of creation are straws in that ocean. The movement of the straws comes from an agitation in the water. When the ocean wants the straws calm, it sends them close to shore. When it wants them back in the deep surge, it does with them as the wind does with the grasses. This never ends. Yeah, whew. Every time it gets me, and sometimes in new ways. The most incredible part here is the end. And so I just want to reread it here. I know it can tend to go really fast when you're listening to a poem especially. So he says, there is no reality but God, says the completely surrendered sheik, who is an ocean for all beings. So here we have, let's break this down into its components, right? Here we have a sheik that is surrendered to the, we'll just say, fact that there is no reality but God. It says the completely surrendered sheik, who is an ocean for all beings. Okay. And we can interpret that a lot of different ways. Maybe we could say that the sheik is anchoring in the knowledge, the wisdom that there is no reality but God to our earthly existence. Be one interpretation. And then Rumi goes on to say that the levels of creation are straws in that ocean. So we're talking levels of creation here, so we can think about, the spirit realm, maybe the physical realm, as being a couple of levels of that. And the movement of them, right? I picture this very much like the swaying grasses that he brings in here. Comes from an agitation in the water. And so again, if the sheik is the ocean for all beings, surrendered to this reality that there's no reality but God, the sheik is doing the holding, is surrendered into the ocean of the infinite, of the divine, which is then occasionally stirring the water, stirring the pot, right? And when the ocean wants the straws calm, it sends them close to shore. When it wants them back in the deep surge, it does with them as the wind does with the grasses, and this never ends. And so there's a bit of, I guess, an irony here involved in this poem, in the end here, particularly in this idea of the ocean and the sheik and this movement in and out. And it's a really centrally important idea to the concept of mysticism and our spiritual lives and spiritual journeys on this planet. It's fundamental, we might say. Okay, and that is that the sheik is completely surrendered, and so becomes an ocean for all beings. But they're completely surrendered to the idea, to the reality, that there is nothing separate from them and God. And so as they surrender and become the ocean, they're really just becoming God. And so God, we could say here, is the ocean. Okay. The water gets agitated in the different levels of creation, including us, those of us mere mortals existing here in these bodies, still trying to figure out how to completely surrender. When that ocean wants us closer to shore in the calm waters, safe and protected, that's what we get. And maybe you've experienced times in your life where it felt like things were just flowing, things were easy, things were calm. But when the ocean wants them back out in the deep surge, it does with them as the wind does with the grasses, which we'll return back to in a second. And sometimes maybe you felt like this in your life. You're out in the deep surge getting crashed over by waves and just overwhelmed and completely helpless. The difference between us, most of us, and the completely surrendered sheik is not that the sheik is one with God and we are not. It's that the sheik has surrendered to being at the will of the ocean. Okay? So this gets a little confusing because the poem suggests that the sheik is the ocean for all beings, but remember that that's sort of a dualistic interpretation, which is sort of not really what we're getting at here. Not really what Rumi is getting at, I don't believe. Okay? So the difference is that the sheik has accepted and surrendered to the whims of this ocean in which we all live. The difference between him and us is that we haven't completely accepted it yet, right? We're still fighting. When we're out in the deep surge, we're still swimming back against the power of the ocean, trying to get back to the calm waters of the shore. We think that the fact that we're being crushed by waves and drowning is our own fault, right? Something that we did or something that the world is doing to us. We're the victim in our story. Whereas the sheik accepts that whether things are calm or whether we're out in the deep surge is not, in the end, up to us. It's about how we react to that circumstance that is the difference. Okay? We're both surrendered. We're both at the mercy of God. Right? One has accepted it. One has surrendered to being surrendered. And the rest of us haven't realized that we're at the mercy of the ocean that is God. Okay? But we're working on it, hopefully. And so the last piece here that we just needed to return back to, so many more things I could talk about this poem forever, is back to this idea of the grasses. The lordly wind loves the weakness and the lowness of the grasses. So again, here we're talking about surrendering, right? Never brag about being strong. Never brag about how, metaphorically here, good a swimmer you are, right? When you're out in that deep surge getting crushed by the waves, it doesn't really matter how strong of a swimmer you are at that point, right? It's better to surrender to the experience than exhaust yourself in the false belief that you have any ability in your limbs to swim back to shore when you're in that circumstance, right? Doesn't matter how strong of a swimmer you are, if you're out in a storm surge in the middle of the ocean, you're not getting back to shore unless God brings you back to shore, unless the ocean decides that it's going to whip up a current for you, right, and drag you back to shore. Okay? So never brag of being strong. The lordly wind loves the weakness of the grasses. The same wind that uproots trees, right? That power to rip trees out of the ground makes the grasses shine. A grass is flexible, it's malleable. It goes with the flow of the wind, whereas a tree is a bit more rigid, right? It's stronger, it's rooted in, but it resists the wind more than the grass does. And so no matter how hard the wind blows, the grass bounces right back, right? But if the wind blows hard enough, even a strong oak tree will snap in half and fall. Okay. So again, this idea that we're in control, this idea that, we have all of this power and strength to control and grip and direct our lives is actually getting in the way, right? That compared to the power that exists outside of us, we are not as strong as we might like to think. So, and that's not meant to be discouraging, right? It's meant to be an encouragement to surrender and get into flow with the divine intelligence, with however you want to say it, of the universe, of the world around us. Once we start flowing with that instead of fighting against it, then we're co-creating, right? We're tapping into that power. We are becoming all-powerful in a way. All right. So I hope that all resonated and made sense. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Take good care.